Before a chosen one ever rises into their full potential, before they step into power, purpose, or destiny, there is always a period of awakening. Subtle at first, but unmistakable once you know how to recognize it. This awakening is not a dramatic explosion of power or a sudden revelation delivered from the outside. It is an internal shift, a deep stirring within the character that signals something fundamental is changing. Their inner world begins to move, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently, but always in a way that tells them they are standing at the threshold of transformation. These signals mark the moment when their dormant potential, long buried or unrecognized, finally starts to surface. Awakening is the point where the old version of the character can no longer function as it once did. The life that felt comfortable suddenly feels constrained. The mindset that once seemed sufficient now feels too small. The emotions they thought they understood begin to shift into new patterns that they cannot ignore. Without anyone telling them, without any overt confirmation, the character senses that something within them is demanding evolution. It is as if an internal voice, quiet but persistent, begins to speak with more clarity, guiding them toward a path they have not yet walked, but somehow recognize as their own. This is why the awakening signs of a chosen one are so important. They reveal the moment when destiny becomes internalized, not because some external force declares it, but because the character feels it in their bones. They begin to sense that their role in the world is about to expand. Something inside them whispers that they are meant for more, not out of arrogance but out of alignment. They sense that they can no longer remain who they have been. Their intuition sharpens, their emotional sensitivity heightens, their perception widens. And with each small shift, they move closer to the point where they can no longer deny that change is not only approaching, it has already begun. The central question guiding this video is simple yet profound. What are the key signs that reveal when a chosen one is awakening and preparing to begin their true journey? Because these signs are not random. They follow a deep psychological and symbolic pattern that appears across mythology, storytelling, and even real human development. They are the markers of transition, the signals that someone is crossing from one version of themselves into another. And those who learn to recognize these signals in themselves or in others gain insight into the early stages of transformation that often go unnoticed. In this video, we will break down 3 core awakening signs that consistently appear in the Chosen One archetype. First, we will explore the internal disruption, the moment the old self begins to break apart, creating discomfort not as a punishment, but as a precursor to growth. Then, we will analyze the rising intuition, the emergence of a deeper inner knowing that guides the character in ways logic alone never could. And finally, we will examine the urge to act, the shift from waiting and reacting to feeling compelled to move, to confront, to step forward into the unknown with a sense of quiet conviction. These 3 signs are not just indicators of awakening, they are the engines that drive it. If this topic resonates with you, if you find yourself drawn to the psychology and symbolism behind transformation, or if you feel connected to the idea of awakening into a new version of yourself, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who might connect with the message, and subscribe for more analyses that dive deep into the heart of the Chosen One archetype and the journey of inner evolution. The first unmistakable sign of a Chosen One's awakening begins not with a burst of power, not with a revelation from the outside world, but with a rupture from within. This internal disruption is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it grows steadily until it becomes impossible to ignore. It manifests as an intensifying conflict inside the character, a psychological pressure that builds between who they have been and who they sense they are becoming. The old self begins to crack, not because it is weak, but because it has reached the limits of what it can hold. The life they once moved through with ease begins to feel foreign, uncomfortable, or constricting, as if the identity they once wore no longer fits the shape of their expanding inner world. At this stage, the character often feels as if they are living between 2 realities. On the outside, nothing may appear to have changed. They might still follow the same routines, interact with the same people, and inhabit the same spaces, but internally, something profound is shifting. They begin to feel disconnected from their surroundings, even from themselves. The things that once defined them, habits, beliefs, relationships, ambitions, no longer evoke the same resonance. It is as if a quiet but powerful voice within is insisting that the life they are living is too small for who they are meant to become. This sense of misalignment is not random. It signals the collapse of outdated identity structures. Every person develops patterns of thinking, behaving, and believing that shape their early self. These patterns may have been necessary for survival or comfort at one time, but every pattern has an expiration date. When the chosen one's potential begins to awaken, those older patterns cannot support the weight of the emerging identity. The character senses this intuitively. The coping strategies that once helped now hinder. The dreams that once guided now limit. The roles they once accepted now feel restrictive. What they are experiencing is not a breakdown, but a breaking open. The internal disruption often begins with discomfort, not the kind that comes from external circumstances, but the kind that rises from the depths of the psyche. They may feel restless for no apparent reason, irritable without understanding why, or overwhelmed by emotions that don't seem connected to anything tangible. It is the emotional equivalent of outgrowing a room that has become too small. They may not know what the next stage of their life looks like, but they know with certainty that the current stage cannot continue as it is. This growing discomfort is the early signal that transformation is approaching. As the disruption intensifies, the character begins to question everything they once accepted as stable. They question the beliefs they were raised with. They question the identity they constructed. They question the version of themselves they present to the world. They question whether the path they have followed is truly theirs, or simply one they inherited. This questioning is not rooted in rebellion, but in awakening. The chosen one senses that something large is stirring inside them, something that demands clarity and authenticity. They begin to peel back the layers of their life, exposing truths they once ignored or avoided. This stage is psychologically uncomfortable, because it challenges the very foundation of their identity. Their internal world begins to split into two distinct forces, the gravitational pull of the familiar and the rising force of the unknown. The familiar feels safe but restrictive. The unknown feels expansive but terrifying. The character often finds themselves oscillating between these forces, unsure of which direction to move. Yet even in their uncertainty, they sense that resistance is futile. Once awakening begins, the old self cannot regain its former shape. The collapse of outdated identity structures often brings a deep sense of disorientation. The character may feel emotionally unanchored, unsure of where they belong or who they truly are. They might feel disconnected from old friendships, disinterested in old passions, or detached from the expectations that once guided them. This disorientation can create the illusion of instability, but in truth, it is a natural part of the transformation process. The mind is rearranging itself, purging beliefs and emotional attachments that no longer serve the emerging version of the self. What feels like falling apart is actually the early stage of coming together. During this disruption, the character may also experience heightened emotional sensitivity. They feel things more deeply, more intensely. Emotions seem amplified, raw, and unfiltered. This is because awakening strips away the numbness that often accompanies stagnation. The character is waking up to themselves, and in doing so, they must confront emotions that have long been dormant. This emotional intensity is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of expansion. The psyche is preparing to hold more meaningful experiences, deeper purpose, and greater inner power. One of the most defining features of this stage is the growing sense of dissatisfaction with the ordinary. The character may find themselves losing interest in superficial conversations, empty routines, or anything that feels purposeless. What once satisfied them now feels hollow. They crave something more, something meaningful, something aligned, something real. This craving is a sign that their inner world is awakening. They are no longer content with living on autopilot. They feel compelled to search for something deeper, even if they cannot yet name what that is. At times, the character may feel like they are becoming someone unrecognizable. Their preferences change, their reactions change, their judgment sharpens, their tolerance for the inauthentic evaporates. They may withdraw from environments that drain them and feel drawn toward spaces that challenge or inspire them. These shifts often confuse those around them, especially people who are invested in the old version of the character. But from an awakening standpoint, these changes are inevitable. The old self is dissolving. The new self is beginning to surface. The internal disruption also reveals itself through the persistent feeling that something is calling them, an opportunity, a path, a mission, or a possibility they can sense but not yet articulate. This call is not external. It arises from their deepest inner core. They may feel it as intuition, a dream, a recurring thought, or simply a sense that they are meant to step into a larger role. This call becomes louder as the old identity continues to break down, and the more the character tries to ignore it, the stronger it becomes. Awakening does not allow comfort, it demands evolution. Through this entire process, the chosen one experiences a psychological shedding. Old beliefs fall away, old fears lose their grip, old identities unravel. This shedding is not neat or orderly. It can feel chaotic, exhausting, and emotionally heavy. But underneath the chaos lies clarity. The character is being reshaped by force, not from the outside, but from within. Their potential is pushing upward, like a seed breaking through the soil. The pressure they feel is evidence that they are outgrowing their former limitations. The internal disruption is the first sign you cannot ignore, because it marks the point of no return. Once the old self begins to break, there is no going back. The character cannot unknow what they have realized. They cannot unfeel the misalignment. They cannot retreat into their former identity. Awakening demands progress, even if that progress is slow or uncomfortable. The character may resist, but resistance cannot stop the transformation. It only prolongs the discomfort. At its core, the internal disruption is a message. The life they are living is too small for the person they are becoming. Something greater is calling them, and the only thing standing in the way is the structure of the old self that must collapse to make space for the new. This collapse is not a failure. It is the beginning of truth. It is the moment when the character's inner world begins to expand beyond the confines of who they were. It is the breaking that precedes blooming. And while this stage may feel unsettling, it is also profoundly empowering. It is the sign that transformation is already underway. The chosen one has begun to awaken, and the old self knows it. The disruption is simply the echo of evolution, a reminder that even before they rise, the journey has already begun within them. The second major sign of a chosen one's awakening emerges not from the external world, nor from visible transformation, but from a deep and unmistakable shift in inner perception. This is the moment when intuition begins to sharpen, subtly at first, then with increasing clarity, until it becomes impossible to dismiss. The character experiences a form of inner knowing that defies logic, prediction, or ordinary reasoning. It is not something they can explain, yet it fills them with a sense of direction so strong that it feels like truth. This intuition becomes the compass of their awakening, guiding them toward their future path long before they fully understand what that path is. Before this stage, the character may have relied primarily on logic, habit, or external cues to navigate life. They may have followed the expectations of others, the rules of their environment, or the comfortable grooves of routine. But once intuition awakens, these familiar systems of navigation lose their authority. The character begins to recognize a deeper source of insight rising within them, one that offers clarity without evidence, certainty without explanation, and direction without instructions. This shift does not occur because they suddenly gain mystical foresight. It occurs because their inner and outer selves are beginning to align. Intuition in this context is the merging of heart and mind into a higher level of perception. It is the integration of emotional intelligence, subconscious processing, pattern recognition, and spiritual awareness that creates a kind of internal wisdom the character did not previously possess. This wisdom reveals itself in moments that feel both surprising and deeply familiar. The character may suddenly sense which path feels right or wrong. They may have a powerful instinct about a person's intentions. They may feel drawn towards certain choices, even when those choices seem illogical or risky. And more importantly, they trust these instincts with a seriousness they have never felt before. The sense of direction that comes with rising intuition is one of the clearest signs of awakening. The character may not be able to articulate why, but they know they must move in a particular direction. This could manifest as a pull toward a new opportunity, a desire to leave behind something that no longer aligns, or a compulsion to explore something unfamiliar. The direction is not forced, it is felt. It does not shout, it persists. This form of intuitive calling is one of the earliest signals that the chosen one is being drawn toward a higher purpose, one they cannot yet fully understand, but can already sense. Alongside this sense of direction emerges a heightened awareness. The character begins noticing details they previously overlooked. Their perception becomes sharper. They read between the lines more naturally. They detect subtle emotional shifts in others. They become more sensitive to environmental cues, energetic dynamics, and the nuances of situations. It is as if their senses are amplifying, not in a dramatic supernatural way, but in a deeply human, deeply perceptive one. This expanded awareness makes the world feel richer, deeper, and more interconnected than they once realized. This heightened awareness is not random. It develops because intuition requires a wider field of perception than ordinary consciousness. To tune into deeper truths, the character must perceive more than surface-level appearances. As a result, their mind begins to decode situations on multiple levels at once: emotional, psychological, intuitive, and logical. They begin to understand motivations not because someone explains them, but because they can feel them. They navigate situations with instinctive precision, responding to subtle signals that others miss entirely. This expanded awareness marks a dramatic shift from their earlier self, who may have relied solely on facts or external validation to make decisions. One of the most profound manifestations of rising intuition is the unshakable feeling that something bigger is calling them. This feeling might come as a whisper, a pull, a vision, or a persistent thought that keeps returning, no matter how often they try to dismiss it. The character may feel connected to a larger mission, purpose, or destiny, even if they do not yet understand its form. This sense of calling is not rooted in ego. It does not arise from the desire to be special or important. It arises from deep alignment, a recognition that their inner evolution is preparing them for something meaningful, something impactful, something beyond the confines of their present identity. This inner calling often triggers a shift in priorities. The character becomes less motivated by immediate gratification or external approval, and more attuned to long-term growth and alignment. They may lose interest in shallow pursuits and become drawn toward experiences that challenge them, expand them, or resonate with their evolving inner truth. Their instincts pull them toward choices that support their transformation, even when those choices feel uncomfortable. This instinctive shift demonstrates that intuition is not merely an emotional reaction, it is a strategy for future growth. As intuition strengthens, the character's instincts become clearer and more strategic. Instinct is no longer a raw survival response, it becomes refined and intelligent. The character learns to differentiate between fear-based impulses and intuitive direction. Fear urges them to retreat, avoid, or protect themselves unnecessarily. Intuition guides them toward growth, purpose, and alignment, even when the path leads through discomfort. This distinction represents a major psychological evolution. The character begins trusting their inner signals with confidence, knowing that intuition leads toward truth, whereas fear leads toward stagnation. This strategic intuition becomes particularly evident in decision-making. Previously, the character might have struggled with indecision or relied on external advice to choose their path. But now, decisions feel clearer. Their inner knowing cuts through confusion, offering a direct sense of what feels right. This clarity does not eliminate uncertainty or risk, but it gives the character the confidence to act despite them. Decisions no longer feel like guesses, they feel like steps towards something meaningful. This internal clarity is a hallmark of awakening, because it empowers the character to move even when they cannot see the full road ahead. Another significant aspect of rising intuition is the ability to see what others cannot. This does not mean supernatural vision, it means perceiving deeper truths that lie beneath the surface of situations. The character begins recognizing patterns, consequences, and emotional currents long before they become obvious. They sense shifts in relationships, opportunities, and dangers early. They understand hidden dynamics. They pick up on subtle cues that allow them to anticipate what is coming. This heightened perceptiveness is not a coincidence. It is the result of their inner transformation. When the mind becomes aligned with deeper awareness, it naturally begins to detect truths that transcend linear logic. This higher perception often brings a sense of quiet certainty. Certainty, in this context, is not arrogance or stubbornness. It is the calm confidence that arises when the inner and outer worlds begin to harmonize. The character might not know how things will unfold, but they know they are on the right path. Their intuition becomes a stabilizing force, helping them stay anchored even when circumstances are chaotic. This inner certainty becomes a source of power. It gives them the courage to make bold decisions, trust their evolution, and step into the unknown without collapsing into fear. Rising intuition also reshapes the character's relationship with time. They become more aware of timing, when to move, when to wait, when to push, and when to let go. This sensitivity to timing reflects a deeper understanding of the rhythm of life. They begin aligning their actions with moments of readiness, rather than forcing outcomes prematurely. This ability to act with timing is one of the most advanced forms of intuition, because it blends awareness, patience, and instinct into a single, fluid form of wisdom. The development of this higher intuition marks a profound turning point in the awakening process. It signals that the character is no longer navigating the world as their old self. They are operating from a more evolved, more perceptive version of themselves, one that is guided not by fear, not by habit, but by inner truth. This new perception allows them to engage with the world on a deeper level, making decisions that align with their emerging purpose. Intuition becomes both guidance and confirmation. It assures them that even though they cannot yet see the full picture, they are moving in the right direction. In essence, rising intuition is the bridge between awakening and action. It is the force that nudges the character out of stagnation and into alignment. It is the whisper that reminds them they are meant for something greater. It is the inner compass that points toward their future long before they arrive. And once this intuition awakens, it rarely fades. It grows stronger, clearer, and more insistent, guiding the chosen one toward the next stage of their transformation. When intuition rises, the chosen one is no longer asleep to their potential. They are awake, aware, and quietly preparing for the moment they must rise. And just as the old self broke open in the previous stage, this stage ensures that the new self begins to take shape, guided by instincts sharpened by truth, aligned with purpose, and ready for what comes next. The final and most decisive sign of a chosen one's awakening is the emergence of a powerful urge to take action, an inner propulsion that pushes them beyond contemplation, beyond hesitation, and beyond waiting for circumstances to change on their behalf. Up to this point, the awakening has unfolded inwardly through disruption and heightened intuition. But once the internal groundwork has been laid, something shifts in the character's behavior. They stop looking externally for permission, guidance, or rescue. Instead, they become the initiating force in their own story. This shift from passivity to intentional movement is what solidifies the awakening. It is the moment when the chosen one stops being someone who reacts to life and becomes someone who shapes it. This urge to act often begins quietly. A subtle restlessness grows within them, a sense that they can no longer remain still or maintain the status quo. This restlessness is not reckless impulse. It has a clarity behind it, a direction that aligns with the intuitive knowing they developed in the previous stage. They may not have every detail figured out, but they know with increasing certainty that they cannot remain where they are. The life they once accepted without question now feels like a waiting room they have overstayed, and although the next step may be uncertain, the need to take that step becomes undeniable. At first, this urge can feel confusing. The character may struggle to understand why they suddenly feel compelled to change, move forward, or confront something they've avoided. But this confusion fades as the inner momentum grows stronger. The feeling shifts from curiosity to necessity. It becomes emotionally and psychologically uncomfortable to remain inactive. They may even feel that staying in place is more painful than facing the unknown. This is the awakening in its most active form, the moment when the internal transformation demands external expression. The urge to act often reveals itself through a growing intolerance for circumstances that once felt acceptable. Patterns, situations, relationships, or environments that previously caused only mild irritation now feel unbearable. The character becomes acutely aware of anything that limits their growth, drains their energy, or contradicts their evolving identity. This includes toxic dynamics, unfulfilling routines, outdated responsibilities, or self-destructive habits. What once blended into the background now stands out clearly as obstacles. And rather than adapting to those obstacles, the chosen one feels compelled to break away from them. This refusal to tolerate the old is a sign of deep alignment. It demonstrates that their inner world has reached a point where staying the same is no longer an option. Even if they lack a clear plan, the emotional truth is unmistakable. Something must change. This necessity becomes the catalyst for movement. They reach a tipping point where the desire to transform outweighs the comfort of familiarity. This inner decision marks the true beginning of the shift from passive existence to intentional purpose. As the urge to act intensifies, the character begins to feel pulled toward a new path, mission, or confrontation. This pull feels both mysterious and precise. They may not know the final destination, but they sense the direction. It might feel like a quiet call, a vision of possibility, or a growing certainty that they must face something they once feared. The pull does not force them, it invites them, and yet the invitation feels too important to ignore. It carries the weight of destiny, not in a mystical sense, but in the sense of inner alignment, calling them toward evolution. This pull often manifests through recurring thoughts or emotional impulses. A particular idea might keep returning, urging them to explore it. A certain person or situation may keep appearing in their mind. A goal they once dismissed may start to feel necessary. The repetition is not coincidence. It is the psyche telling them that something meaningful awaits on the other side of action. These recurring impulses are signs that the subconscious has aligned with the conscious mind, creating a unified direction for the character to follow. As they move toward this new path, the chosen one's behavior begins to change noticeably. They start taking risks they would have avoided before. They initiate conversations, decisions, or transitions they once feared. They let go of attachments that no longer serve them with surprising clarity. Their movements become bolder, not because they are fearless, but because their inner conviction outweighs their fear. Courage emerges not as the absence of fear, but as a commitment to act despite it. This internal commitment transforms their entire relationship with action. The character may also experience a newfound sense of urgency. This does not mean panic or haste. Rather, it is a deep recognition that the time for waiting has ended. The urge to act becomes a steady drumbeat within them, reminding them that growth requires movement. They feel as if life is no longer something happening to them, but something calling them forward. This urgency is not about speed, it is about momentum. It is the energy of awakening transforming into the energy of becoming. The transition from passive to proactive behavior becomes evident in their decision-making. Instead of asking what is easiest, safest, or most familiar, they begin asking what is necessary, authentic, and aligned with their emerging purpose. Their choices become more intentional. They stop avoiding challenges and begin facing them head-on. They stop drifting and start directing. The world around them may remain unchanged, but their relationship to that world shifts dramatically. They see possibilities where they once saw limitations, and they engage with life from a place of inward authority rather than external pressure. This urge to act also sparks the beginning of responsibility. Even before they fully understand their mission, the character begins to sense that they are responsible for answering the call rising within them. This responsibility is not imposed, it is chosen. It arises from the realization that they cannot ignore their potential. They cannot continue living as a smaller version of themselves. They feel accountable to their inner truth, and this accountability gives their actions weight and purpose. The moment they accept this responsibility, they step into the first stage of true leadership. As the urge to act deepens, the character develops greater emotional resilience. They no longer crumble under uncertainty. They no longer retreat into old patterns. They move forward, even when the path is unclear, trusting their intuition to guide the next step. This resilience is a direct result of their awakening. Having confronted internal disruption, and developed intuitive clarity, they now possess the emotional strength to transform insight into action. Their movement forward becomes a demonstration of their evolving identity. One of the most transformative aspects of this stage is the shift in the character's sense of power. Previously, power may have felt distant, external, or overwhelming. But once the urge to act takes hold, power becomes something they activate, not something they wait for. They realize that their strength grows through movement, not stasis. They discover that action reveals capability, and through each step they take, they become more capable of taking the next one. This creates a feedback loop of empowerment that rapidly accelerates their transformation. This shift into action is the moment when awakening becomes concrete. Internal disruption and rising intuition establish the foundation, but action is the manifestation. It is the proof. It is the embodiment of everything that has been building beneath the surface. When the character begins to act intentionally, they confirm to themselves and to the world that the awakening is complete. They are no longer simply sensing change, they are creating it. This inner momentum becomes impossible to ignore. Even if external circumstances resist, even if others misunderstand, even if obstacles arise, the chosen one continues moving. Their actions become a declaration of who they are becoming. They break the inertia of their old life and willingly step into the unknown, guided by the quiet certainty that movement is now necessary. With each step, they transform awakening into purpose, and purpose into destiny. In this stage, the chosen one stops being a passive participant in their story and becomes an active force within it. The urge to act marks the moment they stop waiting for change and start initiating it. It is a profound psychological shift, the final spark that propels them from awakening into evolution, from potential into embodiment, from who they were into who they are meant to become. As we close this exploration of the awakening journey, it becomes clear that a chosen one's rise does not begin with dramatic external events or sudden divine intervention. It begins quietly and internally. Awakening is not a single moment of revelation. It is a layered unfolding, a sequence of inner signals that, once noticed, can no longer be dismissed. The breakdown of the old self, the sharpening of intuition, and the powerful inner urge to act are not random emotional fluctuations, but meaningful shifts in the character's psychological landscape. Each stage reveals a deeper truth about who they are becoming and prepares them for the path that lies ahead. The breakdown of the old self marks the first significant shift. It is uncomfortable, destabilizing, and often confusing, yet it is the essential dismantling of outdated identity structures. This breakdown is not destruction for its own sake. It is an act of clearing, an internal reorganization that makes room for a more expanded, authentic version of the self. It is the moment when the familiar begins to feel constrictive, when the character senses that remaining in place would be a kind of emotional suffocation. This internal collapse is the first sign that something new is beginning to rise. The rise of heightened intuition follows naturally. As the old self dissolves, the character's perception expands. They begin to sense things more deeply and recognize truths more clearly. Intuition becomes a guiding force, offering direction where logic alone cannot provide answers. This intuitive knowing acts as an internal compass, pointing them toward paths they may not yet fully understand but somehow trust. It helps them navigate uncertainty with unusual clarity, reminding them that their transformation is not only emotional but perceptual. They are beginning to see the world and themselves through a more awakened lens. Finally, the urge to act solidifies the awakening. Once intuition strengthens and the old identity begins to fall away, the character can no longer tolerate stagnation. They feel compelled to move, to choose, to step forward into the unknown with purpose. This urge is not impulsive, it is intentional. It arises from alignment and clarity. The character moves not because they are running from something, but because they are being pulled towards something greater. It is in this stage that awakening becomes visible, transforming quiet inner shifts into decisive external action. Together, these signs form the blueprint of awakening. They illustrate that evolution is not random, it follows a rhythm. And while these patterns are often explored through the lens of the chosen one archetype, they are not exclusive to fiction. Anyone can experience these same awakening signals in their own life, when they reach the threshold of becoming a stronger, more aligned version of themselves. Whenever a person begins outgrowing their old identity, sensing a deeper intuitive truth, and feeling compelled to step forward despite uncertainty, they are experiencing their own awakening. The signs are universal. The transformation is personal. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who may need these insights, and subscribe for more in-depth content exploring character development, inner evolution, and the psychology behind powerful archetypes.